Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to Mondays with Mr. Happy, aka Mr. Happy Mondays, a weekly Q&A show where you ask me questions and I answer them. No long intro. I'm addicted to Path of Exile 2. I'm actually working on a reroll right now, and I need to farm a lot of gold. So that's going to be it for the intro. Don't expect too many videos this week, maybe one or two, and not on Path of Exile, just in general, because I mean, what can I say? I'm just playing a lot of Path of Exile too. It's for me. It's my birthday month. You know, it's been a rough year. This one's for me. This one's for me. Real quick, thanks to the sponsors over on Patreon for supporting. Nobody has to support. They choose to. None of my content is pay-gated. So if you enjoy the content, thank you for supporting, but feel free to just watch, like, subscribe, and of course, ask a comment for next week's episode of Mondays with Mr. Happy. With that, let's get into it. All right, for selfish reasons, I'm going to lightning round. I have all the time in the world, technically, to edit this, but literally just between that cut, I was like, I'm lightning rounding this one because, again, I'm trying to get going. You know what I mean? Like, that's how addicted I am to Path of Exile 2 right now. Working on a Lightning Invoker Monk, and I'm re-rolling for cast on hit, so I can fix it, because it's been really weird. I've been going my own way, and it's been rough, but either way, let's get to it. So first one we had, congrats on the fruit clear. Enjoyed while religiously watching your progress, how well your static communicated. No tempers, no harsh words, simply professional and highly effective. Do you have any advice for cultivating that attitude? You really, honestly, if one person doesn't mesh, then it doesn't work. Like, you can try to set ground rules and boundaries, and even then, you're gonna find sometimes where like communication methods just fall apart. And it takes just adults to step away, be like, hey, that communication method clearly didn't work between us. Let's figure something out. Generally, that's where you run into issues with groups, is people who communicate poorly. Hi, Ivy. You want in for the lightning round? That's fine by me. So we got lucky that there were 8 people that were, fully functioning adults that were able to have that. But if not, I mean, you can try to communicate that you want to work on those things, that you want the group to behave that way, but people will be people. So it really just takes the right 8 people. That's why I always say raiding with 8 people that are like-minded is the most important thing when you're actually joining a static as opposed to doing Party Finder. Next one. Hello, 2 small questions. Hello. One, did you like how the extra little story things based on the fail states they put in through? Yeah, they did the same thing in DSR, and I enjoy when fail states reflect like the story not going the way that the Wandering Minstrel wants to do. And of course, the post-enrage cutscene with Pandora is obviously another one. Yeah, I always enjoy those little details. That's why I made sure to include them in my kill VODs and my progression VODs. I have a feeling we'll be seeing a lot more of that in the future, but not with every ultimate. Just maybe like 1 out of every 2 or 3 ultimates, you'll probably get something like that. So high-end player, how important do you see difficulty in fights? I see fun as the main factor. Like, top is arguably a pretty hard fight. I don't think it's that hard personally. But in terms of getting 8 people to perform consistently, it is a much tougher fight than DSR in a lot of ways. So I feel like it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish, because you can have something that's really difficult and not fun, or you can have something that's really difficult and fun. And I think the 2 best examples are top and DSR. Top is really difficult and not fun, and DSR is really difficult and quite fun. So it really comes down to a lot of like randomness, low reaction times, things that are not inherently easy to track as the player, on top of multiple permutations that are determined. Top has so many issues is all I'm really trying to say. This fight was definitely on the easier side, but I said after DSR that the game needed another T, and then we got top. So after top, I really felt like the game needed another T, and this is T. This is the thing that gets people back into ultimates excited and actually somewhat acclimated to the ultimate mindset without needing to go back to the vastly outscaled actual T, UCOB, and Uwu. So difficulty for me is not always about being the hardest. It is about being fun, and I had a lot of fun with this. Could it have been a little bit harder? Absolutely. There are 100% things I could poke at that I think are design flaws with Fru that would have made the prog slightly longer, but also would have been a better fight as a whole. But they came pretty close to something that I think is healthy overall for the game, and will get people in, and then potentially going back and doing DSR on top. And fortunately, Ultimate is forever content with the way we treat it. So having now, 6 Ultimates and another one being kind of on that scale, but more recent, it just gives people a better entry point. So that's something I'm really, really excited about. Next one we have, congrats on the fruit clear. Thank you. And hello to you too. Main thing has been on my mind this expansion, especially with fruit, is how much Pictomancer is dominating the game. Yeah, you know, it's funny. They actually nerfed it enough to the point where it was still one of the top DPS, but it wasn't so dominant. But then this fight's a downtime fight, so Pictomancer is just designed perfectly for those scenarios. And that's the thing. It's not even about overtuned. It's about, it was overtuned, and then it's, in my opinion, still slightly overtuned. I think Black Mage should be doing more than Pictomancer, and I don't think Pictomancer should be where it is. So I personally think it could use some nerfs, but at least it was closer. But its overall design is overloaded. It just does everything, and that's a bit of a problem. And not does everything like Red Mage does everything. I mean, yeah, Red Mage has Vercure and Verraise, but Picto is like, I don't care about raising, just kill the boss faster. So it's kind of tough. This is definitely the strongest the job has ever been on release. The second strongest the job has ever been on release, I want to say, is Ninja in 2.4, which was so strong that they actively had to nerf it like within a couple of weeks because the players found a better rotation than the devs did. And you know what that was? That was us pre-pull Hootoning. The devs were like, oh, I didn't think they would do that. Why? Why wouldn't you think we would do that if you give us the power? That was a lesson they would learn for years about pre-pull shenanigans that they've largely, not entirely, done away with. So yeah, Ninja is really the only other one. But it's just, yeah, I don't know. There wasn't really a question in there. It was just a lot of analysis about the strength of jobs on release. So yeah, Picto definitely the strongest the job has ever been on release, followed by, I think, Ninja would be the next closest time. Next, we have a couple of questions here. You covered the below question well in your Picto rant video. Okay, so I'll skip that one. But thank you for the Halo. Speculation opinion. When do you think we'll see a material container 5.0? I don't know if they, like, we don't have a pattern for that yet, but I was actually discussing this on stream maybe a month ago. And I was thinking probably before 8.0, but it's really hard to say. Until they add one, we don't have a pattern for prediction, so we'll just have to keep an eye out for it. You know, I don't feel comfortable saying for certain it'll be by this time, but I think before 8.0, you know, maybe. Hello, and congrats on Fruit. What makes a good ultimate mechanic and or phase? So, I think one thing that makes ultimates very, very challenging is a good mix of downtime and uptime mechanics. Downtime phases being largely like a major challenge, like Death of the Heavens is a really good example. But your uptime mechanics are really, I think, where ultimate shines. Like I think that, like, for example, the entire Bahamut stretch of UCOB, while those are all pretty good downtime mechanics, realistically, Heaven's Fall and 10 Strike are the only ones that you really consider seriously. And the most interesting phases are things like Nail or Ads, or of course Golden, or, you know, you go up to T. And the full uptime phase against BJCC and Living Liquid are far more entertaining than the Alexander one. So I think downtime phases to give players some sort of agency on focusing on the puzzle mechanic. And by puzzle, I mean, like, generally there's a big jump rope that you have to solve with everyone in very specific positions whenever you're doing a downtime mechanic. But you really need the uptime mechanics in order to push the players to actually, A, know how to play their jobs, and B, do so while under the pressure of a higher than average difficulty mechanic. And that's where I think Fru kind of falls flat. There's too many downtime phases and they're all too early. If there was just the one downtime phase in the first phase, and then the second phase was almost full uptime, and the third phase was full uptime, and then the fourth phase, honestly, the fourth phase should, I know this may seem controversial, but Crystalline Time is good of a mechanic as it is. I would have liked to have seen a more, at least, let me rephrase. I think Darklit should be a harder uptime mechanic. You know, there's very few uptime mechanics in that fight. And Darklit, I would have liked to have seen bumped up a little bit. I think they could have done a little more with Pandora too, but I think there needs to be a good mix of downtime and uptime. And also, it needs to evolve the use of the Savage level mechanics to a degree that feels on Ultimate. That's another place where Fruit kind of falls flat. A lot of the mechanics are actually straight up lifted out of Savage. You get kind of excited because you see Cyclonic at the start, and you're like, oh, Cyclonic, that's brand new for Ultimate. But it's one of the very few mechanics that's brand new for Ultimate, or one of the few things that functions somewhat differently from its original version, or it's like, again, it's a brand new thing technically, but Cyclonic completely replaces the traditional elemental break, so it's more like an evolution of it. It's really tough, but you just need the right combination of difficult downtime without being overbearing like top, and difficult uptime without being overbearing on the DPS. I'll say top is really the only major DPS check that we've had across all the ultimates outside of the final phase. So us not really having one here wasn't that big of a deal. It's just the things leading into them could have been a little bit more fleshed out if you were specifically looking for difficulty. Next, we had, hi there, Mr. Happy. This one's an opinion question. Regarding Sven's Burden, I've heard complaints from folks who were disappointed that the hole-in-the-wall mechanic didn't make it. Honestly, I had a hard time imagining what they would have done interesting with the wall. I thought maybe the wall would show up, but when I thought about it more, I was like, what can they really do that's interesting with the wall? Like, you can make it so that, you use the gravity wells, and, you might have to all go to one side of the platform, or you might have to be like forward and back on the platform and split into light parties. Like, of course, the idea that splitting having a wall come from in front and then a wall come from behind, and we all know how bad people are at looking behind them for mechanics. Just look at Shinryu. There's a few things, but by the time I was done with the fight, I didn't miss it. I was surprised it wasn't there and that they didn't come up with something. But yeah, I guess Radical Shift does kind of fit the function. It's more like the ground instead of a wall coming at you. And that works out. Again, I wasn't disappointed with that fight at all, even without the wall. So it's hard for me to think of too many things that I would have wanted to see when I was very pleased with that extreme. It's definitely way better than Endsinger. And I think they've really gone 3 for 3 with extremes so far this fight, with Zoral Jaw being the least good of them, but still not bad. I still really enjoy that fight and the kind of visual chicanery. Sorry, I just watched Better Call Saul the other week again. That comes with it. Next, there was Ollie Ho. Grats on the clear. Thank you. While watching, you were lightning reviewing ultimates in terms of difficulty. Yeah, sorry, it said lighting reviewing, so I think it meant lightning. For T, you said the difficulty was front load. I'm curious what you meant. It means that all the most difficult stuff happens early in the fight. So generally speaking, dolls, living liquid, the positioning for all the cones, limit cut, BJCC, those are the hardest parts of T, other than Wormhole. And Wormhole's not really that bad. I think a lot of people have gotten over the difficulty hype of Wormhole and come to realize that it's really not that hard. So it means that the back half it feels kind of slow and poorly paced, especially the very last phase where stillness is honest. People looking at their clones and not remembering what they had, and stillness end up being the two most dangerous things in that entire phase. So it's like the first 7 minutes are really good, and then after that, it's not that great, is what I mean by front-loaded. Uwu is back-loaded. It's mid-loaded, because Titan's really the hardest phase in Uwu. And Yukob's pretty balanced all the way through. Like, Twintania and Nail aren't really that tough. I'd say Nail is a decent step up over Twin, but not crazy. And then you have the entire stretch from Heaven's Fall all the way until the end of Twin Nail phase, where that difficulty kind of spikes up, but then it stays consistent. I'd say from Heaven's Fall until you reach Golden, it's actually kind of like a plateau of difficulty. It's just higher than the parts that came before, and obviously harder than Golden, where realistically you're your own worst enemy on Golden. So that's what I mean by front-loaded. It's just that the first two phases are far more difficult than the phases that follow them. Let's see. I love baiting invisible Proteans. Me too. Hope you and the cat are doing well. Is it normal for the latest jobs introduced to be so? Okay, yeah. So we just covered this with Pictomancer. No, this is far more. If anything, some people overestimate jobs that are not overpowered. Reaper was a good example where the only thing they ended up nerfing was the healing. Gave a little bit of attention to the other jobs, and Reaper was suddenly the, quote, worst DPS. Not to mention it's a gauge job, so any downtime mechanics it really suffers on. Like I said earlier, Picto and Ninja are really the biggest outliers, and most other jobs, if anything, are either underpowered or just barely powered enough. This was a very different case. Let's see. Then we had me and my static plan to do Fru. Hello, by the way, in the new year, and I got a healer question. I noticed that some resources have 2 Bis sets for raiding and 1 for Bis Savage. Use the ultimate. The ultimate has more piety. Wonder so. Okay, so let me be clear. The Savage set, I'm pretty sure, has crafted gear. Do not do that. That is why the Savage set is there, is because you don't need all the stats to survive, and it's not balanced above item level 710. That is why that set exists, because it will do more damage without compromising your ability to clear in any capacity. You never use that set for ultimates. You always run as close to Biss as possible. Missing a piece, like a 720 tome that's not upgraded, not the end of the world. 730 weapon on one person instead of a 735, not the end of the world. It does affect the limit break, but limit break's not that important in Fru anyway, so it's not that bad. Do not bring the Savage Biss set with crafted gear, which is why it has less HP in mind. Do not bring that into Ultimate, ever. This one's got 3 comments under it. Very curious. Hey, hope you're doing well. Hey, sorry for the long post. This is not a long post. I love when people apologize for a long post and it's like 7 lines of text. That's nothing. Trust me. There are posts before yours that are way longer. So do you think they'll ever add another tank healer in later expansions? Yeah, we're going to get another tank most likely in the next expansion, another healer the expansion after that. We have a semi-pattern that they've started to form over the years where you can basically expect certain roles to appear every other expansion. The only foil to that was that they added Reaper and Viper because maiming and scouting were only 1 job each. Instead of seeing melee having 4, then 5, then now 6. They just looked at the individual gear sets. That was the only foil to it, which before Reaper we wouldn't have bet on, but now we actually do. So yes, I do think that we'll see more, but I don't think they'll be flexible like Astra. I think they'll just fit into one of the 2 roles. And by the way, I know you mean flexible like old Astro, but honestly, Astro makes White Mage nigh obsolete, just being basically a pure healer that has great throughput, but also has a bunch of barriers on top of it. Like, what job from 11 would you like to see most in 14? I want my Puppet Master to be a Fizz ranged. It's not going to happen. I'm telling you right now, an impossibility. But still, what are your thoughts on the state of the game as an MMO? I mean, I don't know what that's supposed to mean. What people look for in MMOs is pretty different. The idea is more that the world is massively multiplayer and online, and not that every single experience is tailored to being massive and multiplayer and online. Plenty of people like soloing, especially with our Deep Dungeon community, or even Wrath, who's going through and trying to solo through as much of the game as possible. Others constantly like to group up. Some people like to socialize. It depends. I mean, you can have an MMO with literally no, in theory, you could have an MMO with 0 group play, but tons of social features. And honestly, for some people, that's what 14 is. That they pretend like grouping up for things outside of roulettes doesn't exist. Not that they wouldn't if they did, but they just don't do the content. But they treat it as a social hub, and for them, that's a good MMO. So I feel like while there's a lot of really basic things 14 needs to be doing better, it's been like friends list problems for way too long. The idea that the mobile game might have a better friends list is wild. But it's still there's still a lot of things that need to be done. I think the moment the leveling experience for most job isn't great with how skills are removed or adjusted. Newer jobs and how they sink down. Yeah, it can be kind of rough, but then, I mean, that's always been a thing. Some jobs sink down fantastically, like Monk, and I think they should be looking at that as a guideline for how to do things in the future. Also, more open world content. This game's not built for it. I'm going to tell you right now, the hunt, treasure maps, going out and gathering, doing your dailies outside, like, those are the open world content you're going to get. The super fates. The game isn't tailored for open world content. Basically, they'd have to detailer it for certain things to then specifically make areas where boss fights are consistent. A great example would be Bozia, where they have the duels, that they basically carve out arenas for the duels, and that's like it. And even then, that's a 1v1. Like, you basically need to make mini instance arenas in the overworld, which can be a little off-putting. Like, even the ones that we have for the super fates, I don't know about you, I find those to be incredibly out of place most of the time. Like, especially look at Archaeotania. It's just some random plateau in the middle of the Tempest. It's just kind of strange, you know? Whereas something like Ixion is out in the wild. Behemoth has the Dominion, which is a Final Fantasy XI reference, but, you know, all the same. I don't think you should ever expect more serious open world stuff outside of a fate grind also, if you're trying to do that. And the other things that I mentioned. I just don't think you should expect them. Congrats on your clear, and hello. Hi. 2 quick questions. One, why do you have to be ranged when you're in love with Monk? Because it's because everybody wants to play melee and nobody wants to play Fizz range, but I play Fizz range, so even if I want to play something else, doesn't matter because I already play the role that everyone wants me to play. 2, is Bard picked over Dancer for pure damage difference? It was picked over Dancer because Bard has a lot more balanced of an experience in regards to its personal contribution and its raid contribution. First of all, improv, I don't even consider a defensive cooldown for Dancer. It's pathetically bad. A 5% barrier. You're almost never getting a bigger barrier than that because you don't... The number of times where you have the time to channel it and it is of value after you've channeled it is very low, as opposed to adding an extra 5% barrier to a major mid-fight mechanic by double weaving it, and even then it's just like so not valuable. Whereas Nature's Min can be paired with healer stuff in order to make barriers significantly stronger than the 5%. So there's that. On top of that, it has better downtime management. Its songs can now be used without a target, so you can constantly be generating gauge. You can be setting up your 2-minute burst during Army's Payon and then come back to the fully buffed one instead of having to worry about your downtime song timing so much. And you come back with Apex and Blast most of the time, so your 1 minutes end up being really strong. Dancer's not that bad with it. Quite frankly, you're not really like, oh no, I didn't generate Feathers or Esprit during downtime. Like, you're not that upset about that. But it really depends on, it really doesn't have as much personal output as it does relying on other people. With Picto being so strong, Dancer's still a pretty strong pick. I would say, honestly, any of the Fizz range are okay. Machinist probably the worst of the three, especially in Fru with the fight design. But Bard it was the more reliable pick before knowing the fight. And Dancer is the safe pick regardless of the fight. You have on Avant, you can fix mistakes more easily. You have your Curing Waltz, you have Improv, you still have Samba. You can buff one person to do way more. Like, it has its elements. I just think Bard is the more reliable source of output than Dancer. Disregarding overall DPS, just more reliable. And then we have another congrats, thank you, and hello. I've actually have a mobile question. Since we haven't heard any hard news on the new combat system, some screenshots have started to surface from the Chinese version. Realm Reborn's level cap at 50. They want to include everything, but what about daily content? I was curious if the mobile devs plan on basically rewinding time and making it as a Realm Reborn. No, we can already see from the screenshots, it really is its own system. Expect a lot of the systems to overlap or to be reinterpreted, and fully expect to get, allied tribe quests and going out and doing those. And you can walk around the world, and we've now seen the combat system having, looks like, I think it was 8 different buttons it might have been. Basically all around the attack button are all the different skills on the right thumbstick, and then the left thumb. I'll have to see it actually in function, but I've only seen a few screenshots of it. But I don't expect them to be mobile-esque daily systems, more like 14's. 14's daily systems are mobile-esque as is, so I guess it technically wouldn't be that much of a change, but I don't expect it to be disguised as much as other mobile titles do their dailies with, like, log in and do these 5 things every single day that take like 5 to 10 minutes, and if you don't, you'll fall behind. I don't think they're doing that, but again, I haven't looked at all the screenshots that are coming out for it. Then we have Chow. Happy Chow. After seeing Fru, I got really excited about getting into Ultimate. Is Ua really the best option? No, I think you can go right into Fru. I think T into Fru, or just right into Fru if you've done the most recent Savage tier, might be okay this time around. I'm writing off Uwu as if you want to do it, you can do it. Same with you, Cobb, to be honest, at this point. Like, if you want to do those things, you can do them. But if you're brand new, I almost think that it's better to go into Fru because it better reflects current game design than those older fights do. So the experience is more translatable. It prepares you more for stuff like DSR and top, even though it's on the easier side. So yeah, you can go right into Fru, in all honesty. I think it can be a good entry point for a lot of people. And then we have also looking at PFCs, most groups say, ooh, have it. They are talking about a plugin. They say that if it says have it, it usually means that the person with the PF already has it. If it means do you have it or can I have it, that means that they want somebody in the group to bring it. So that's the translation. You don't need it, just one person needs it, and then it takes care of itself. I hate that that's a thing, but PF will be PFing. What can you do? Hi, Happy. Hope you're doing okay. Thank you. I told you on one of your live streams I want to do Fru after I finish Tinu, and you told me to prepare mentally. How'd you rank it between all ultimates? I've kind of done that already a bunch this video. I think you'll be fine. I think it was best to prepare people for the worst case scenario with like DSR and top level frustrations, whereas this is definitely more approachable. So I don't think you need to worry too much. I rank it basically between T and DSR, and that's a chasm, mind you. That's like that's like this between T and DSR, just to be clear. It's not like, oh, it's here and it slots it. No, it's here and it's like somewhere right around here with DSR still being way up here. But I wouldn't worry about it too much now having done it. I think most people will have more fun than frustration in Fru. Congrats on your Fruit Clear. Hello. Hi. I have a couple of simple. What is your opinion on the current state of the game? I kind of just answered that before. Think 14 is getting boring? No. I still enjoy doing plenty of things. I have basically little checklists that I write off, and I decide, do I want to do this quickly? Do I want to do this slowly over time? And that's how I've always treated it. The big thing is I've played for so long, I've done a lot of those bucket list items already, so I don't feel as compelled to log in every day. But that's fine, because I don't need to feel compelled. I've got Path of Exile 2 right now, Monster Hunter in February, and plenty of things in between. Not to mention, I have a chaotic group ready to go for December 24th. Somebody invited me to one that's full of a bunch of people that I know. So I'm excited for that as well. Then we have Hey Happy. I know you're not a tank main. I was wondering what your thoughts on the current fight design. I wish there were more tank busters for tanks that only require 20 to 30% to survive, but they were more frequent. We had that a lot more when we had instant tank busters like Mountain Buster and Rock Buster and Titan. And even like going into the Heavens Ward design, there's a lot of those like instant tank busters or long form tank busters that you end up wanting stuff like that for. I genuinely believe we should go back to a time where you want to pop a 20%. I guess technically they need to make 40% the required minimum to survive at least because of the 25-second cooldowns. But I think there's a lot on the table when it comes to tanks being asked to do tank-specific mechanics that they need to kind of lean more into because they've given tanks too many tools. Effectively, and you say it right here, you either invuln or you kitchen sink. And that's pretty much like all you ever do. Sometimes you need a cooldown for auto attacks during a busy mechanic, and that's about it. And that's been that way for quite some time now. But if you go back into old fights, you can't do that. So I do think that they should maybe learn from themselves further back in the past and focus more on those more frequent but doesn't require as much MIT to at least survive. Like, I'm not saying survive with a lot of health. I'm saying to survive in general, you'll want 40%. I think they should go back to focusing on that kind of stuff. What was your favorite part of doing Futures Rewritten? It's just a good experience overall. I just had fun. Like, that's it. I didn't have like a singular favorite part. I just had a lot of fun the entire time. Hi, Haps, got 11 question. Got back into the game after a 15-year break, and I've actually cleared the first set of quests for treasures for the mythic weapon. If you remember or happen to know, is what's the most efficient way to get through the steps for farming Alexandrites, Ichoric tokens for each of the objectives? I mean, honestly, soloing salvage is one of the biggest things. Most people will say you either solo salvage, like, just once, I think it's an hour. Is it once an hour? I think it's once an hour. Like, you literally go Ain Harrier once an hour, salvage once an hour. Like, you just bounce back and forth between the two is an option. But, and those are the biggest grinds because of the Alexandrite. I think it's once an hour. I don't remember exactly how often salvage is now. I'm having a hard time remembering. It might just be once a day for salvage that people do it. But most people will sooner recommend to just try to make a ton of gil and buy Alexandrite. Like, it's so much faster to farm gil. Even like getting your million gil a week from Acheron shield cells is if you're just buying Alexandrite, like, do that. Make sure you don't forget to spend all of your sparks and tabs and all that stuff every week to get the maximum amount of gil that you can, because that's just free Alexandrite on the table. Whereas stuff like Ikor, you're gonna have to do Ain Harrier for 50 hours basically, like not 50 hours straight, but like at some point sprinkled throughout to have enough resources. You're gonna need all of that. I don't know if there's a guide for it specifically, but it's still a pain. Honestly, doing some of the missions that you have to do to actually like unlock it to get captain status, and then to again, you know, actually do this. That's one of the worst parts of the whole thing. It's not even the Alexandrite. Like, it's honestly doing all of the assault missions again. Ugh. But I don't have like a specific answer for this. I mean, you just got to do it. Like, you just got to do your best to actually just do it. And the Alexandrite is still going to be the biggest gate. Not to mention, keep in mind, when it's done, it's only level 75. You then need to go and get all the resources to actually upgrade it all the way. And that's an ordeal in and of itself as well. So you're still in for a bit of a long haul. It's not as bad, but it's still something, you know, don't underestimate it. Hi, Haps, hope all is well in this cold-ass month. Yeah, it's been cold. I know based on how I'm dressed, I shouldn't be complaining that it's cold, but it's not cold right now. So I'm okay, but it has been cold lately. What they could do to mitigate the DPS check issue going forward. We know that the buff class has gotten 7.1. It already made a joke-worthy DPS and Savage even worse. Do you feel like there's anything Swerve could do? I mean, the only DPS check they genuinely failed on was the 4th fight. I've had plenty of groups fail 2 and 3. Like in the PF especially, even with a good amount of gear, like the average player is still failing the DPS checks to 1, 2, and 3. And 4 can really fall apart if either Sword Quiver goes wrong or people really screw up Sunrise, which happens most of the time. But honestly, 4 was the only place they screwed it up. And honestly, it's largely because of Pictomancer. Like, I'm not even kidding. Like, Pictomancer, just being as strong as it is, just has gone a long, long way. So, they really need to rein in Picto. I think until they do, like, this is going to keep happening. But they really need to understand that they need to rein in Picto. How much do you think the 90% damage downs helped with the prog of Fru? I don't know what you mean by helped, but having a massive damage down as a punishment is a fate worse than death. And I think that's probably for the better. It means that in theory you can still recover pulls, but that the punishment for screwing up is you are useless. Like, even if you're alive to fulfill mechanics to prog, you are useless. And that's another positive, right? Like, you might be doing 90, like somebody might get a damage down, or 3 people get a damage down or something. You go, okay, well, the fight is over, but I'm still alive. I can practice the next mechanic and the movement for it. So I would say that's kind of a positive overall, instead of just insta-killing people, especially when getting the muscle memory for mechanics is more important than things like DPS checks, for example. So I actually think it was a pretty good idea overall. Let's see. Oh, AA is absolute authority. See, I've been getting confused by abbreviations because I feel like everyone's just abbreviating everything. I've never seen abbreviated before. And now I'm like getting confused by like really obvious ones. So it's rough. Long time watching, first time asker. Recently listening to Grinding Gears, which featured yourself, and I heard part about add-ons at your group was just VPN for ping and nothing else. How does a VPN affect ping? So, especially in the United States, there's a lot of pathing issues for connections that are unoptimal. So we have 2 members that are connecting from outside of the States, and when they ping into the States, the hops that they have to do can be optimized, basically. It doesn't bring their ping down by much. Normally, it only optimizes like a 200 ping to like 150, 160. But at that point, you'll take anything. And within the United States, even if you're going from like East Coast to West Coast to connect to the server, sometimes you just get boned. Like, you can even just run into a bad node and have a VPN ready to try to get around a bad node. So it even just eliminates like the possibility that something goes wrong with your connection that's not necessarily ping related, but straight up like can't connect to the game related. So that's about it. All it's doing is changing the hops that you're doing to traffic your connection to the server, and that can result in somewhat additional ping. Whereas you could also use a VPN in theory to, protect your data, which is what a lot of the sponsorships you'll see over like YouTube and Twitch do it for. But that's terrible. You cannot do something like Surfshark. You would not use that for your ping. That would actually hurt your ping like a lot if you did something like that. So that's all it is. Let's see. Let's see. Hello, Haps. Congrats on your week 1 for clear. Thanks. Progging the fight right now at phase 3. The DPS check seems much more lax than DSR was on content. DSR didn't have that bad of a DPS check on content. It was really just phase 2, and it was mostly because people got hit by the in-out mechanic and suffered a massive damage down. Not dissimilar to what happens in Fru, just with an overall, I'd still say like a harder check overall and way more body requirements than Fru has as a whole. But yeah, DSR didn't really have major DPS. If anything, I remember our group held DPS on some phases. Like Eyes, we just played the game and it worked out. Phase 1 worked out just fine. The intermission rewind never was a problem. Phase 5 was super easy. Double Dragons also had a basically non-existent DPS check. Keeping them even was tougher than actually finishing it. And then the last phase is not that bad, but like when you're, there and you're trying to get your first clear, it's particularly rough because people aren't playing optimally. I look back at mine and I go, oh, what was I doing? Yeah, DSR really didn't have much. I'd say really it was just phase 2. But I will agree there's still laxer here, and I think a lot of that's Pictomancer, to be completely fair. I don't think it has anything to do with the Arcadian or the balance of Dawn Trail. I think it's Pictomancer. That's it. I just think it's Pictomancer and nothing else. You mentioned you wanted to play Monk with something movement related. Flicker. No, I'm not playing Flicker. So I was doing I went Invoker Monk, even though I really want to go Chaos Monk. And the reason I didn't go Chaos Monk is because I didn't know when I would get Mana Leech. Because for Chaos Monk, I see Spaghettification, I see Mind Over Matter, I see Mana Leech on hit, and I go, oh, I could be an unkillable god with like infinite MP, and I can just nonstop hit things to get my MP back, because they'll have to go through my MP in order to get to my HP, and I'm using my HP to fuel my spells, HP and Energy Shield to fuel my spells because of the name of the ability on the way to Spaghetti. Like, I saw, and I was like, oh, I could go Hand of Chiyula, and I can go a few Chaos Curses. I could, like, Wither and, like, a couple of other things. So I could do, like, 3 Curses and Marks with Hand of Chiyula. And with Hand of Chiyula and enough attack speed, I can easily do Mantra of Destruction, Contagion, Hex Blast, spread all the Chaos damage, all the Curses and Marks everywhere. And then I need like one more filler ability somewhere in there and I'm good. When I went on Invoker Monk, I was like, okay, I don't know when I'm going to get Mana Leech or how I'm going to get a reliable source of Mana Leech yet. I don't know enough about the game. Let me go Invoker Monk, right? And so it's going really good for a while. And then I hit Act 3 and it was like, I just became literally a sorcerer, basically. Just shockwaving and then occasionally going in for Falling Thunders. Now I'm going to move to the Tempest, cast on hit ball orb, like just fill my screen with balls everywhere and hope that actually acts as an improvement. But I need to farm a bunch of gold, which is why I'm trying to finish this up. It says I need to respec quite a few things in order to get to that. And even then, I think I still need a few more points to get to the critical mass of when that's actually going to work at its fullest. I'm not playing Flicker. I was baited into Flicker. To be fair, Flicker's level 48, and I don't even have the gem for it yet. But I got baited into Flicker in Path of Exile 1 because I was like, oh, everyone plays Flicker. Just do Flicker Strike. So I picked up Flicker Strike as a fucking level 10 and got obliterated because Flicker Strike doesn't come online till way later. So I'm trying to avoid that. Then we have just letting you know everything looks great. Any chance I can get your workout regimen? My workout regimen right now is pretty simple. I do legs one day, back one day, chest one day, arms one day, and I fit shoulders into back and arm day, and I fit abs into any 2 of those days. So that's a 4-day split, 1 day off, and then 4 days after. I haven't been able to follow that split super great between Aloha passing and all the patch related stuff. So I was only going 3 days a week. So I basically had to condense like back and buys, and I was actually doing back and tries and chest and buys just so I didn't like double down on the muscle, because if you're doing, you know, tries on chest day, you're already doing tries on chest day, like it's automatic. So I just didn't want to do the isolation movement on the same day. But that's it. It's almost it's not really like a legs push pull because I have the separate arm day, which I normally didn't do. I actually only just started doing arm day to begin with. But yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. But it's been a crazy last couple of months, so I've not been able to keep to it as well as I would like to. And then what is this? Boycott FF content. There's a reason why it's down at the bottom, I guess. And then midcore, I heavily disagree with the sentiment that savages are midcore. I consider myself midcore both in what I like and my current skill. For me, the cutoff for midcore is older extreme. Yeah, it's so no. Midcore has got to be the average level of skill required in general. Because keep in mind, you can be midcore in the amount that you play the game, and that means absolutely nothing. Like, you can be hardcore in the amount you play the game, softcore in the amount you play. It's all irrelevant to whether or not content is the time investment is softcore, midcore, or hardcore. It's entirely up to the average skill that's required, especially compared to the other content in the game. And the bottom line is current extremes and first and second Savage fights are actually very similar in difficulty. Again, Criterion's base difficulty is very similar to those Savage encounters. It's not the occasional one mechanic bounces above that, but it's also only 5-minute fights. It's 3 separate ones, but it's 5-minute fights. So no, definitely with midcore, you're looking at the average difficulty of the encounter, and the systems that engage it. Like, I like, there's certain like ones that are really close to one or the other. But I would say, yeah, if you're looking at mid-core content, you're looking at content that requires a higher than average skill, but not the pinnacle of skill. Whereas something that's more beginner friendly is stuff, you know, there's the softcore content would be like, you know, dungeons and maps and stuff. Like, that's the casual content that everyone can enjoy. The barrier for entry is incredibly low. The skill barrier is low. The time barrier is low. Every barrier is low. The mid-core stuff is what requires more skill and inherently will require more time. And the hardcore stuff will require even more skill and even more time. The thing is, the amount of skill required is often about equivalent to the amount of time required. It's not always the case. Stuff like deep dungeons can be really long. There's RNG elements to it, but there's a lot of factors. However, I will say that that's largely a perspective-based thing. A lot of, like you've said here with your own opinion, a lot of people will see a barrier that is hardcore to them, and thus it's not mid-core content. Like, it's like, oh, I'm scared to death to do the new extremes. That's way too hardcore for me. That's the thing. But when you have the scope of the entire game in place and you can objectively look at every single piece and even the average participation of those things, you can generally get a better concept as what is an objectively mid-core content versus what is personally mid or hardcore content. But you're not technically wrong to say that you consider certain things more than mid-core or more than, consider certain things hardcore. It's just that I think that's a more personal outlook on the content versus its objective value within the overall structure of the game. That's all. That would be my opinion on that statement. But anyway, that's going to be a wrap for this week's episode of Mondays with Mrhappy. I'm going to get back to playing Pat. I got a lot of build fixing to do because what I was doing is not working. I really thought Falling Thunder with power charges was going to work out. And boy, is it not. I got to fix it ASAP. So thanks for watching. Be sure to ask questions in the comment section. There will be very few videos this week, but I will be live streaming Path of Exile. If you need viewer rewards on Twitch, tune in. If you need the Chimera pet, tune into Twitch. It's gift 2 subs or subscribe yourself and gift 1 sub as long as it's not a Prime sub. That as well. So enjoy. And I don't know if there'll be a State of the Realm this week. Holiday season might be rough for State of the Realm. We'll see. But anyway, with that, I'm going back to the grind. I'll see you next time. Until then, bye-bye.